In a clandestine corner of the world, a place whispered about in hushed tones, where ancient cobblestones absorbed centuries of secrets, there lay an ancient, bustling town that seemed to pulse with an almost palpable mystical energy. The narrow, winding streets were lined with charming little shops, each with its own unique allure, their brightly painted shop fronts adorned with curious trinkets and forgotten artifacts, each appearing to be a portal to another realm entirely. The very air carried an invigorating sweetness, a heady concoction of magic mingling with the comforting sense of freshly baked goods emanating from a nearby patisserie and the delicate fragrance of blooming flowers spilling from window boxes, all enticing passers-by to linger and explore. Yet, amid this vibrant, almost overwhelmingly enchanting atmosphere, Lila found herself feeling decidedly achingly out of place, a discordant note in a symphony of wonder. With her bright auburn hair cascading in soft, unruly waves that caught the dappled sunlight, and her emerald eyes darting around with an insatiable, keen curiosity, Lila was, to an outside observer, a picture of youthful exuberance, a vibrant splash of colour against the muted tones of the ancient town. Yet, beneath this seemingly carefree exterior, within her there simmered a profound sense of restlessness, an insistent, almost painful yearning for something more, something undefined that hummed just beyond her reach. She had always been the quiet girl, content to observe from the periphery, standing at the edge of every crowded room, much like the vibrant, overlooked colours in a masterpiece, unseen and largely unsung, her presence acknowledged but rarely truly felt. As she wandered through the labyrinthine streets of the town, the spectacular charm of her surroundings began to feel less like a comforting embrace and more like a fragile veneer, thin and easily cracked. Underneath lay the persistent ache of her feelings of isolation and misunderstanding. Each cheerful laugh that echoed from the bustling cafes, each snippet of conversation that spilled into the air like bright poppy petals, only further highlighted her own struggles to truly connect, to genuinely fit in. A chill, despite the warm sun, pricked at her skin, a constant reminder of the invisible barrier that separated her from the ease and camaraderie she witnessed all around her. The sweet scents, usually so comforting, now felt cloying, a suffocating perfume of other people's happiness. One evening, as dusk began its slow, inevitable descent and painted the town in breathtaking pastel hues of lavender, rose, and gold, Lila found herself inexplicably drawn to a quaint, unassuming antique shop. It was nestled almost shyly between the bustling main street, now alive with the chatter of evening revellers, and the enigmatic, shadow-laden alleyways that snaked deeper into the town's mysterious heart. The shop itself seemed to hum with untold secrets, a low, resonant thrumming that Lila felt deep in her bones. Its dusty window displayed an especially peculiar assortment of items, old clocks with gently ticking mechanisms that seemed to mark not just time, but eons, faded sepia photographs of strangers whose eyes held stories she could only imagine, and books that looked as though they were not merely printed, but summoned from the very depths of forgotten lore, their ancient bindings whispering of distant eras. At that precise moment, her heart quickened its rhythm, thumping a hopeful tattoo against her ribs, and she felt a distinct flicker of excitement, a spark of anticipation that warmed her from within. Perhaps, just perhaps, this would be the adventure she had long craved, the one that would finally shake her free from the confines of her quiet existence. As she pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside, a soft, melodious bell chimed overhead, its gentle sound creating a warm, inviting ambience that enveloped her like a comforting embrace, easing the tension in her shoulders. She breathed deeply, taking in the intoxicating scent of aged paper mingled with rich musk, an olfactory tapestry woven from notes of distant histories and untold stories. It was a smell that promised mystery and revelation, a fragrance that hinted at forgotten worlds. Her fingers, almost unconsciously, began to trace the worn spines of the countless books lining the towering shelves, feeling the smooth, cool texture of time itself etched into their surfaces, each groove and crevice a testament to the passage of ages. Each tome held a universe of possibilities, adventures waiting patiently to be unearthed, secrets eager to be discovered. Yet, with every glance, with every touch, Lila felt a strange melancholic pang, as if she were looking into a mirror that reflected not her own essence, not the vibrant, restless spirit she felt stirring within, but rather the multitude of lives she could never live, the daring adventurers, the valiant heroes, and even the compelling villains trapped forever within their narratives, forever out of her reach. A wave of bittersweet longing washed over her, a desire to be part of those grand tales, to not just read them, but to live them. As she delved deeper into the enticing, almost overwhelming chaos of the shop, her eyes, ever keen, caught sight of a rich crimson velvet curtain veiling a dimly lit doorway in the far corner, half hidden behind the imposing presence of a grand grandfather clock whose steady tick-tock was a rhythmic heartbeat in the quiet space. Despite her inherently hesitant nature, something, an almost electric thrum of energy that vibrated through the floorboards and up into her very core, compelled her forward, an irresistible pull she couldn't ignore. With her heart now pounding like a wild drum in her chest, a frenetic rhythm that echoed in her ears, she reached out a trembling hand and pulled aside the heavy velvet curtain. Behind it, she found herself facing a narrow, spiraling staircase that seemed to disappear into the very foundations of the building. The air felt palpably charged, almost alive, a shimmering curtain of energy that seemed to vibrate with anticipation, as if beckoning her to embark on a journey into the uncharted alcoves of the unknown. A shiver, not of cold, but of pure exhilaration, ran down her spine. With a shallow, anticipatory breath, Lila began her descent, her footsteps echoing softly, almost reverently, against the cool, ancient stone walls. The passageway twisted and turned, each turn drawing her deeper into the mysterious depths of the shop, where the air grew noticeably cooler and heavier, filled now with a faint, ethereal, luminescent glow that cast shifting shadows on the rough-hewn steps. As she ventured further, she could distinguish muted voices, a low murmur of conversation, mingled with the soft lilt of laughter and the distant strains of music that floated like gossamer wisps on the cool air, beckoning her onward. As she finally reached the bottom of the winding stairs, the passage widened, and she stepped into a hidden, expansive chamber that pulsed with an otherworldly, ethereal light, emanating from sources she couldn't quite discern. Lila's eyes widened in awe, her breath catching in her throat. Before her lay a breathtaking gathering of otherworldly beings, each radiating an undeniable aura of magic and profound mystery. It was a scene ripped directly from the most fantastical of fairy tales, a living tapestry woven from myth and legend, populated by creatures of all forms, some reminiscent of the fleeting shadows that flicker at the edges of dreams, others exuding an almost unbearable elegance, like living remnants of forgotten legends, their beauty sharp and dangerous. The air shimmered with their collective power, a thrilling, intoxicating pressure that made her skin tingle. Among them, effortlessly commanding attention, was an impressively tall figure whose sheer elegance seemed to carve space within the already crowded room, drawing the eyes of everyone present as if by an invisible, irresistible force. He stood with an innate air of command, a quiet authority that needed no outward display, his raven-black hair framing a strikingly gaunt, aristocratic face that seemed to absorb and reflect the chamber's ethereal light, illuminating the hall with his striking presence. Dorian, but even the name itself, a melodic whisper on the air, hung rich with intrigue and unspoken power, was none other than the fabled vampire lord, a name murmured with a mixture of fear and reverence in old stories. There was an undeniable charisma that pulled Lila's gaze towards him, a gravitational force she couldn't resist, as if an invisible thread of fate, spun through countless ages, had irrevocably entwined them together in this unexpected moment. Her heart raced, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs, thrumming with both trepidation at the unknown and a strange, exhilarating sense of rightness. She felt an immediate, profound connection, an inexplicable bond that reached far beyond mere physical attraction. It was something more profound, something ancient, pulsating with raw magic and a surprising, almost frightening warmth. The sudden, overwhelming realization flooded her with a rush of heat. He was a creature of the night, an ageless being who had walked the earth for centuries, perhaps millennia, and she a fleeting spark of youthful vitality, barely having lived 2 decades. Would he even notice her? A small, quiet girl, among all the other fascinating, powerful beings encircling him, each one radiating their own unique allure. Would he even wish to? The thought was a cold splash of doubt. Yet, the more she observed him, the more she felt an undeniable pull, a spiritual magnetism towards him, as if their souls had indeed danced across countless lifetimes, forging an unbreakable connection through the crucible of time, only to finally reunite in this uniquely charged moment. As if sensing her intense gaze, he turned his head, his movements slow and deliberate, and his gaze shifted ever so slightly in her direction. As their eyes met across the shimmering chamber, a spark ignited between them, a jolt of pure electricity that neither could possibly ignore, a silent crackle in the air. Lila felt the entire world around them dissolve into an indistinct blur. No other beings existed, no other sounds penetrated the sudden, profound silence, only the two of them, caught in an enchanted grid of emotion, suspended in an instant that stretched into eternity. But then, with the exhilaration came an echoing pang of self-doubt. Insecurities, like insidious tendrils, wrapped themselves around her heart, threatening to choke the nascent hope. They whispered harsh reminders of the vast, unbridgeable gulf that seemingly spanned between them. She was young, barely out of girlhood, and filled with a fragile tapestry of dreams and aspirations, while he was timeless, poised with an ancient grace, undeniably brutal in his immense maturity, a creature of power and legend. Who was she? A simple, ordinary girl, to interrupt the grandeur of his existence, to presume to even touch the edges of his ancient, profound world. For a fleeting, agonizing moment, Lila stood rooted to the spot, a silent, bewildered witness to a connection she felt deep in her bones, pulsating with an undeniable truth, yet utterly uncertain of how to proceed, paralyzed by the enormity of it all. Fear, cold and sharp, gnawed at her, edging its way through the intoxicating excitement, threatening to consume her, to paralyze her in place. How could she even begin to approach this enigmatic creature who seemed to command the very shadows, whose gaze held millennia of secrets? What would he possibly see in her? A simple girl, lost and unremarkable among an endless sea of wonders and powerful beings. With a deep, fortifying inhalation, she wrestled against the thrumming pulse of uncertainty that threatened to sweep her away, to consign her once more to the sidelines of life. But Lila was tired of being afraid, tired of constantly constraining herself within the rigid bounds of expectation and her own self-imposed limitations. She longed with every fibre of her being for something truly extraordinary, something beyond the grave comforts of her mundane, predictable life, hoping, with a desperate tremor of anticipation, that perhaps in this hidden gathering, surrounded by the utterly extraordinary, she could finally find a piece of herself that had long been shrouded in the mists of longing, waiting to be revealed. With tentative, almost trembling steps, her heart still racing a wild rhythm, but now bolstered by a soft, unyielding resolve settling deep within her, Lila began to move from the protective shadows. She started to bridge the impossible gap between their worlds, her eyes fixed on Dorian's. She dared to embrace the adventure she had yearned for with such fierce intensity, ready at last to confront her fears head-on and discover whether the fantastical tales of love whispered in the bounds of fantasy might, against all odds, become her own breathtaking reality. The vampire lord watched her approach, his dark, fathomless eyes flickering with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat, a silent acknowledgement of her courage. Whatever lay ahead, whatever challenges and dangers awaited them, Lila was now determined to break the barriers that separated them, for the promise of magic and profound connection was simply too potent, too compelling to resist. In that extraordinary moment, bathed in ethereal light, she stepped boldly into the unknown with an unshakable courage, her future irrevocably entwined with the fleeting, fragile hope of an extraordinary tale unfolding in the very heart of the mystical, hidden town. Chapter 2. A Dangerous Invitation. Lila's insatiable curiosity, a burning ember within her soul that no amount of worldly experience could extinguish, had an undeniable magnetism, an invisible thread tugging her back to the hidden realm time and time again. Each venture into that enchanting world, a place where the very air shimmered with ancient magic and forgotten dreams, deepened her understanding of its mysteries and its enchanting inhabitants. But more than anything, it was Dorian, the vampire lord whose presence hummed with an air of both ancient mystery and seductive allure, who drew her most powerfully. Their encounters were like delicate threads, spun from moonlight and starlight, woven into an intricate tapestry of shared glances, whispered words, and burgeoning emotions, each interaction revealing another facet of his enigmatic nature, drawing her further into his captivating orbit. On one particularly tranquil evening, the air itself a heavy, languid balm, thick with the sweet, intoxicating scent of blooming night jasmine, Lila found herself in a secluded glade. The ground beneath her bare feet felt cool and soft, like velvet moss, and the gentle chirping of unseen insects formed a soothing symphony. Moonlight, a silvery cascade from the heavens, danced playfully on the smooth, dark surface of a nearby pond, creating shimmering ripples that mirrored the tremor in her own heart. The ethereal glow brought out the shimmering silver in Dorian's eyes, those ancient pools of wisdom and experience, captivating her in a way that made her pulse quicken, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. They were nestled in the embrace of twilight, the lingering warmth of the day slowly yielding to the cool caress of night, shadows creeping around them like silken veils, stretching and twisting with a life of their own. The world beyond, with its mundane concerns and insistent demands, seemed to fade away, dissolving into an indistinct hum, leaving only the two of them suspended in this beautiful, fragile moment, a pocket of shared intimacy against the vastness of the universe. As they sat comfortably close, the silence punctuated only by the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze, they began to share stories. Dorian, his former dark silhouette against the moonlight, recounted tales from centuries past, his voice rich and velvety, a low murmur that resonated deep within Lila's chest. It wove through the air like the notes of a haunting, forgotten melody, each word a brushstroke painting vivid images of empires risen and fallen, of loves lost and found, of a world so vastly different yet eternally connected to hers. Lila hung on his every word, every inflection, every subtle shift in his tone, utterly enraptured. It wasn't just the grandeur of his adventures that captivated her, though those were undoubtedly fascinating. It was the warmth and vulnerability that flickered beneath his poised, aristocratic exterior, glimpses of a soul that had endured so much, yet still chose to see beauty. She marveled at how the immense weight of his years, the countless seasons he had witnessed, didn't seem burdensome to him. Instead, it added a captivating allure, a depth that pulled her closer even as a tiny, insistent flutter of uncertainty stirred within her heart. It was a feeling of unease, a small, cold knot forming in her stomach, despite the warmth of his presence. Yet, beneath the surface of that enchantment, that intoxicating spell he so effortlessly cast, an undeniable concern began to take root in Lila's mind. It was a small, insidious seed of doubt, planting itself deep within her thoughts, threatening to spoil the delicate, budding connection that was blossoming between them. In the midst of their laughter, light and airy, which mingled with the gentle rustle of leaves above them, she hesitated for a moment, her brow furrowing slightly, a small crease appearing between her eyes. The thought, a heavy, persistent weight, pressed down on her, and she felt an overwhelming need to voice it, to confront the awkward, unspoken shadows of their age difference that lingered between them like an unacknowledged truth. She felt a prickle of fear, a nervous tremor at the prospect of breaking the spell, of shattering the fragile beauty of their shared moment. "You're too old for me," she whispered, the words barely audible, a fragile exhalation that hung in the still night air, like the silvery mist that had begun to curl around their ankles, cool and damp against her skin. They hung between them fragile and uncertain, yet laden with a profound significance, the stark reality of the centuries separating them suddenly undeniable. She found herself slightly afraid of the truth that had tumbled so clumsily from her lips, fearing it might irrevocably shatter the delicate spell they had woven together, extinguishing the nascent flame between them, her stomach clenched with apprehension, awaiting his reaction. Dorian paused, the playful glimmer in his ancient eyes dimming for just a heartbeat, a fleeting moment of introspection before reigniting with a blend of amusement and something warmer, deeper, something that spoke of profound understanding. His lips curved into that familiar enigmatic smile, the kind that both soothed her anxious spirit and excited her senses simultaneously. Leaning in just a fraction closer, a movement so subtle yet so potent, he fixed her with his intense gaze, those eyes that held the wisdom of ages. In that instant, Lila felt as if the very world around them had ceased to exist altogether. That time itself had paused, leaving only the two of them, connected by an invisible, powerful current. His breath, cool and faintly sweet, ghosted across her cheek, sending a shiver through her. "Age is just a number when you're immortal," he countered gently, his voice a low, resonant hum, dripping with a charm that was both ancient and utterly captivating, seasoned with wisdom accrued over countless forgotten years. It was as though he were revealing a profound truth that transcended the petty constraints of mortal time, effortlessly shaking off the insignificant weight of human concerns. The way he spoke it with such casual certainty made it sound so simple, so undeniably true, yet the complexity of what lay behind those words, the vastness of his experience enveloped Lila, making her heart race anew, a whirlwind of awe and wonder. He made her feel as if her mortal concerns were fleeting, almost quaint, in the face of eternity. His unyielding confidence, his absolute certainty in that moment sent a thrilling shiver down her spine, a delicious frisson that awakened feelings she had scarcely dared to explore, dormant emotions now stirring within her. His presence was intoxicating, a heady, potent mix of ancient danger and irresistible allure that wrapped around her like the deepening shadows at twilight, a comforting yet thrilling embrace. In that cocoon of intimacy, that sacred space they had created, Lila felt a depth of connection that went far beyond the superficiality of age or any other perceived barrier. It was something profound, an elemental resonance with the shared experiences, both spoken and unspoken, that bound their stories together, making her feel seen, truly seen, for the first time. The air around them seemed to thicken, charged with an undeniable energy. As their glances exchanged, filled with both an aching longing and a lingering uncertainty, a silent dialogue passing between their souls. Lila realized that her initial hesitation was softening, dissolving like mist in the glorious warmth of the morning sun. What had felt like an insurmountable barrier, a chasm between them, seemed less daunting, less significant, when illuminated by the warmth of his steady, understanding gaze. The nuances of understanding that emerged between them, a silent language spoken by their hearts, began to paint their relationship in vibrant, unexpected shades, hues she hadn't known existed. She could almost taste the sweetness of what might lie ahead, a promise of joy and profound connection. Dorian's words, "Age is just a number when you're immortal," lingered in the air, a comforting, profound reminder that life, in all its wondrous complexity, often defies the rigid limitations we, in our mortal understanding, set for ourselves. In that transcendent moment, surrounded by the flickering, dancing glow of fireflies that dotted the twilight like scattered jewels, Lila understood that time, with all its relentless, unforgiving passage, could not diminish the profound beauty of connection, the sacred bond forged between two souls. She was no longer afraid. In fact, she felt an exhilarating rush of courage coursing through her veins, a bold, defiant energy replacing her earlier trepidation. It was a courage born of deep feeling, an unshakable belief in the magic unfolding before her. With a tentative yet genuine smile finally breaking onto her lips, a soft bloom in the moonlight, she took a step closer, drawn by an invisible force, cherishing this initiation into the thrilling, beautiful unknown. "But what if I want more than just a fleeting moment?" she asked softly, her voice trembling slightly with the sheer weight of her own burgeoning desires, the full, rich longing that had awakened within her. Dorian's expression darkened, his features sharpening with an intensity that sent a thrilling jolt, a delicious shiver through her very core. His eyes, now pools of profound depth, held a promise that made her gasp inwardly. "Then we will create a timeless moment, one that stretches beyond the confining walls of this world and whatever societal expectations, however antiquated, still dare to linger. Every heartbeat, every breath, every whispered secret, every shared glance will be ours, uniquely ours, woven inextricably into the very fabric of eternity itself." His words were a caress, a vow that reverberated through her bones. Lila felt his words wrap around her heart like a silken, unbreakable thread, binding them together with an ancient, powerful magic. As the shadows deepened around them, merging into an almost impenetrable curtain of night, her pulse quickened, a frantic bird against the cage of her ribs, at the profound thought that perhaps they could indeed transcend the limitations imposed by the rigid, mundane world. Perhaps, just perhaps, they were destined to share a story that was as timeless as the glittering constellations glimmering silently above them, a celestial narrative written just for them. The thrill of their fleeting yet utterly transformative connection swallowed her whole, igniting a fierce, blazing flame of hope and an aching, consuming longing within her soul. The air tasted of magic and anticipation. In that secret space, that hallowed ground, where the mundane gracefully met the extraordinary, where human touch met immortal grace, Lila recognized with a clarity that shook her to her core that with Dorian nothing could ever, be ordinary again. The bond they shared was an ethereal promise, a sacred pact whispered between souls, one that made age feel like a mere footnote, an irrelevant detail, to the epic, sweeping tale they were now beginning to write together. And so, with each whispered secret they exchanged, with each soft sigh and lingering touch in that sacred moonlit glade, Lila and Dorian began to unravel the carefully constructed boundaries of their uncertainty, navigating the delicate, intricate dance of their deepening bond. It was the inception of something truly beautiful, a burgeoning romance that blossomed like the intoxicating night, jasmine surrounding them, breathtakingly fragrant and achingly tender. This hidden realm, with all its enchanting wonders and ancient magic, had become not just a backdrop for fantastical occurrences, but the very crucible for the promise of a love that sparked fiercely between them, a love destined to be timeless and gloriously unbound by the rigid rules of their respective disparate worlds. Chapter 3. Whispering Secrets. In the hushed depths of the ancient forest, where gnarled trees formed an impenetrable shield against the mundane world, a palpable unease began to curdle the air. The intoxicating, earthy scent of damp soil, usually a comforting perfume, now mingled with the faint, unsettling fragrance of night-blooming cereus, doing little to quell the rising tide of dread in the hearts of the realm's inhabitants. A rival vampire faction, once dismissed as mere whispers carried on the wind, had solidified into a menacing reality, their presence a discordant note threatening to unravel the delicate tapestry of peace that had long bound this enchanted world. Dorian felt the cold, hard press of inevitability against his own heart. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that inaction was not an option. The very essence of their existence, the sanctity of their ancient way of life, teetered precariously, resting on the razor's edge of a blade. His blade. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, each step silent, elegant, his silhouette, a dark counterpoint against the sliver of moonlight that pierced the canopy, illuminating the sharp angles of his chiseled features. The time for deliberation was over. It was time to rally their forces, and he understood, with a clarity that stung, that their conventional vampire society, steeped in archaic traditions, simply wouldn't suffice. He needed to cast his net wider, to forge alliances that transcended the usual boundaries. And in the midst of this encroaching darkness, one beacon of light emerged in his thoughts. Lila. Her presence, he instinctively knew, was not just beneficial, but absolutely essential. With a deep breath that carried the scent of old parchment and latent power, he began the preparations for a banquet, a strategic gathering designed to unite those who shared their vision, to fortify their community against the encroaching malevolent threat. He could already envision the scene, the ornate silver goblets, cool and heavy in the hand, gleaming under the candlelight, the exquisitely embroidered linens, soft against the fingertips, gracing the long, dark oak table. It would be a convocation of the vampire world's most influential, a gathering steeped in centuries of tradition, raw power and arcane rites, each individual a living testament to a storied past. As the ominous night drew closer, a strange cocktail of anticipation and apprehension churned within Dorian. He paused, a fleeting shadow before the towering, arched window of his ancestral estate, his gaze sweeping across the serene, moonlit nightscape that stretched endlessly before him. It was a world of breathtaking magic and undeniable beauty, yet his thoughts were consumed not by its allure, but by the fragile balance that sustained it all. A knot of anxiety tightened in his chest as he wondered, with a pang of genuine concern, how Lila, with her vibrant, untamed spirit, would navigate the intricate social dance among such esteemed and, at times, haughty company. When twilight finally bled across the sky, painting the heavens in deep indigos and purples, and the first stars began to shimmer like scattered diamonds, Dorian found the courage he needed to send his invitation to Lila. He pictured her in his mind's eye, her radiant smile, a potent warmth that could chase away even the deepest shadows of his own troubled thoughts. But a nagging doubt persisted. What if she felt utterly out of place amidst such a venerable assembly? The other vampires, steeped in centuries of custom and power, carried an aura of ancient authority, a poised self-possession she was still learning to cultivate within herself. Yet, Dorian's conviction in Lila's unique spirit remained unshaken. She possessed an inner fire that burned brightly, fiercely, unburdened by the rigid expectations of their society. He desperately hoped she would recognize that within the intricate tapestry of ancient customs and noble bloodlines, there was a rightful place for her, a seat at the table she was destined to fill, should she choose to claim it. The tantalizing thought of her seated beside him, their knees brushing subtly beneath the heavy embroidered tablecloth, spurred him onward, compelled him to reach out, to draw her into this complex world he inhabited, despite its looming uncertainties. As dusk deepened, casting the ancient estate in long, shifting shadows accented by the flickering glow of lanterns, he made his way towards her abode. The crunch of gravel under his immaculately polished boots was the only sound breaking the serene silence of the approaching night. The air around him grew balmy, charged with an almost electric anticipation, as if nature itself held its breath, sensing the impending whirlwind of emotions that awaited them both. His hand, usually so steady, trembled almost imperceptibly as it rose to knock at her door, his heart thrumming a wild, rhythmic beat against his ribs, a prelude to his apprehension. Lila opened the door, her eyes widening in surprise, framed by the soft, cascading auburn hair that spilled over her shoulders. The air crackled, thick with an undeniable energy, a tangible current that hummed in the space between them. She wore a flowing gown, its fabric seemingly dancing with its own inner light, hinting at her ethereal, enchanting nature. Yet, despite her undeniable beauty, Dorian could sense that familiar, uncomfortable sensation of inadequacy clinging to her, a subtle shadow whenever she found herself among the older, more established vampires. "Dorian," she breathed, her voice a melodic whisper, like the soft rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze, pulling him from the brief reverie where he had lost himself in her presence. "Lila," he responded, the warmth of her name a rich, velvety sensation against his tongue. "I would be profoundly honored if you would grace a banquet I am hosting with your presence. We are to discuss alliances, to gather our collective strength against the shadow of the looming threat that draws ever closer." His gaze, intense and unwavering, settled on her, searching for her reaction, hoping to find acceptance. She blinked, her initial surprise slowly giving way to a flicker of uncertainty as she processed the weight of his invitation. "A banquet, you say? Among the others?" Her voice, usually so clear, wavered, tinged with an insecurity that seemed to echo in the cool, crisp night air. "Yes," he reiterated, his tone firm yet imbued with a profound kindness. "Among the others. But you must understand, Lila, your presence there is not merely desired, it is vital. Your voice, your unique insights, they hold significant sway. I need you by my side as we face this." She bit her lip, a telltale sign of her internal struggle as a whirlwind of emotions danced across her features. Doubt, a hesitant longing, and a stubborn, smouldering spark of excitement. The mere thought of mingling with the seasoned ancient vampires, their haughty airs and intricate, tangled histories, sent a queasy lurch through her stomach. Yet Dorian's steadfast gaze held her captive, a reassuring anchor in the rising storm of her apprehension. Could she truly step into a realm that felt so utterly foreign, so intimidatingly steeped in tradition? "What if I don't fit in, Dorian? I find it difficult to believe that I could contribute anything of true value in such a gathering," she confessed, each word escaping her lips like a ghostly whisper, laying bare her profound vulnerability, a raw nerve exposed. Dorian took a step closer, the small distance between them dissolving until his presence enveloped her, his warmth washing over her like a soothing balm against her exposed insecurities. "You do fit in, Lila. More than that, You shine bright in a way that the others, with their rigid traditions, simply cannot. Never, not for a moment, underestimate the power you possess simply by being your authentic self. The chemistry between them, an almost palpable force, flickered like the faintest wisp of flame, fierce and unquenchable, defying the chill of the night. She inhaled sharply, a subtle tremor passing through her, battling the inner turmoil that raged within her. They stood, mere inches apart, the night wrapping around them, a silken cocoon of intimacy that both intrigued and terrified her in equal measure. "Will you come?" he pressed gently, the earnestness in his plea a potent force, compelling her to confront her inner turmoil with a burgeoning resolve she hadn't realized she possessed. A moment stretched between them, thick and pregnant with unspoken possibilities, the air heavy with anticipation. Perhaps this banquet, which she had initially perceived as a suffocating social obligation, could transform into something more. Perhaps standing together beneath the ancient chandeliers, their flickering candlelight casting erratic, dancing shadows against the worn tapestries of the hall, they could ignite a spark, a shared purpose worth fighting for, a bond strong enough to defy the encroaching darkness. Taking a deep, shaky breath, Lila finally nodded, her voice, though still soft, now imbued with a newfound, fragile determination. "Yes, I will come. I'll stand beside you, Dorian, even if every fibre of my being is absolutely terrified." Dorian's lips curved into a triumphant smile, so radiant it seemed to chase away the lingering shadows that had threatened to engulf them both. "You won't face it alone, I promise you that. We will navigate the treacherous tides of this conflict together, hand in hand." As they stood there, hearts now entwined in a web of unspoken promises, the palpable tension of the approaching conflict loomed ominously on the horizon, dark, heavy clouds gathering with a malevolent intent. For Lila, this banquet had transcended a mere social engagement. It had become a formidable challenge, an opportunity to conquer her own fears and insecurities. Chapter 4. The Rift. The banquet had concluded, leaving behind the echoes of laughter and soft conversations that lingered in the air like the fading notes of a haunting melody that danced just beyond her reach. The dimly lit hall, lined with ornate tapestries and glowing candelabras, casting flickering shadows across the faces of the elite, felt strangely oppressive to Lila, as if the walls themselves could sense the turbulent emotions roiling within her soul. The rich scent of spiced meats and sweet pastries still hung in the air, but all she could taste was the bitterness of misunderstanding, a weighty sensation pressing down on her chest, constricting her heart as the shadows deepened around her. Now, in the aftermath of celebration and mirth, she felt an encroaching darkness settling within her, heavy and unwelcome. Her throat tightened as she searched through the throng for Dorian, her heart racing with the mingled anticipation and dread that his presence ignited. Memories washed over her of their laughter, his charming smile illuminating moments that had felt brimming with potential. He had captivated her, weaving joy and warmth into the fabric of the evening's festivities, unfurling the beautiful possibilities of a bond she had dared to long for, one unencumbered by the shadows of his past. But now the spectre of that history loomed larger, whispering darkly through the crowd, punctuated by the biting realization that his dangerous affiliations were more than mere rumors. She shuddered as fragments of her overheard conversation echoed in her mind, remnants of two guests huddled together in whispered tones and filled with suspicion. "Are you really going to side with him? With that monster?" The words festooned themselves with images of Dorian, his easy laughter pairing perilously with the chilling idea that his loyalty might lie with a notorious vampire ally. It twisted the very fibers of her trust into a tangled web of uncertainty. each strand heavier than the last. Lila had always prided herself on her courage, yet she found herself consumed by a slow, creeping fear that had snuck in like smoke from embers, rising up to encase her heart in an icy grip. The realization cut like glass, and she suddenly saw Dorian differently, not as the ally she cherished, but as a potential threat looming in shadows only she could perceive. Each step he took toward her, smooth and deliberate, felt loaded with consequences that weighed heavily on her mind, scrambling her thoughts even further. Finally, finding him at the edge of the crowd, a familiar figure that had always offered her solace, she hesitated, her stomach twisting tighter than the fabric of her gown. The laughter and jubilation around her faded into an indistinct hum, replaced by the dread that filled the chasm separating them. What if it were true? What if Dorian harbored hidden loyalties that endangered her very life? The thought was suffocating. It constricted around her heart like a steel band, squeezing her breath into shallow gasps. "Lila," he called out, his voice rich and inviting, seemingly unaffected by the swirling shadows that began to encircle their connection. She managed a smile, though it paled in comparison to the warmth that filled her heart at the sight of him, a mere shadow of the depth of her emotions. Internally, she was drowning, her mind racing at what this moment could either forge or shatter. This would either be the moment where she would finally choose to swim, or the instant she would sink into the depths of despair. "Dorian, we need to talk," she began, her voice steady, yet it cracked under the weight of her turbulent emotions. A sensitive concern flickered in his brow as he met her gaze, seemingly aware of the tempest brewing just beneath her composed facade. "Of course. What's wrong?" he asked, the gentle sincerity weaving through his tone wrapped around her like a soothing balm. Yet, it ignited the chaos already raging within her, transforming what had once been a safe haven into a chasm she struggled to bridge. I heard something tonight. About you," she said, the words clawing their way from her throat, dragged forth by an urgency she couldn't deny. "Was it true? Are you loyal to him?" The question lay between them, an unshakable knife thrust into the heart of their sanctuary, sharp and unforgiving. Dorian's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, but enough for Lila to catch the flicker of hurt and confusion that momentarily obscured his handsome features. "Lila, please, you have to understand," he began with an intensity that stole her breath, anguish spilling into his tone, soft yet urgent. But she shook her head, panic surging within her like a tidal wave crashing over jagged rocks. "No, you don't understand. I can't be around someone who has ties to something so dangerous." Each word felt like a jagged stone lodged in her throat, tearing through her insides, agony layering itself over her heart. The expression on Dorian's face brought a pang of regret crashing over her. He recoiled slightly as if she had struck him, and she could feel the hurt radiating from him in waves. It almost shattered her resolve. "Is that really how you see me? As a liability? Is that all I am to you?" The tremor that seeped into his voice, laced with pain, transformed the truth of his feelings into a raw, searing injury that infected her with guilt. She knew he didn't deserve her doubts, yet the turmoil twisted in her mind, distorting his loyalty into a betrayal she couldn't reconcile. "Dorian, I don't want to feel this way, but I can't help it. I can't be close to you if this is going to put me in danger," Lila confessed, her heart racing like a wild creature trying to escape its cage. The truth lay bare between them like a fault line, threatening to fracture the delicate fabric of the bond they had been nurturing. Silence enveloped them, thick and suffocating as he remained still, stunned by her words, his expression a collage of heartbreak and disbelief that twisted her own heart with sorrow. "Lila, I would never put you in danger. You have to know that," he said, his voice steadied by a raw honesty that struck a chord deep within her. She could almost feel the warmth of his words wrap around her like a protective cloak, Yet, it felt inadequate against the icy tendrils of fear that gripped her heart ever tighter, freezing her in the very moment they should have found understanding. As she took a step back, amplifying the emotional distance between them, she knew what she had to say next would lead to irrevocable consequences. I think it's best if we keep distance between us, for your safety and mine. The declaration tore through her as though she had ripped a vital piece of her soul away. The anguish of rejection crashed over her like waves in a storm, leaving her breathless and vulnerable. "Lila, don't do this!" Dorian pleaded, desperation flooding his tone, his wide eyes filled with disbelief and sorrow, a mirror reflecting the anguish nestled in her own heart. "You're not a liability. You're the light that guides me. I don't want to lose you." Yet the very terror she felt distorted his words, morphing the warmth of his longing into an impenetrable wall that confined her desperation. The vulnerability swelled, threatening to consume her in its depths, and she feared that allowing Dorian onto her shores would lead to devastation and ruin. "It's what has to happen," she said, her voice cracking as she turned away, unwilling to confront this moment any longer. With every step away from him, she felt something vital shattering, agony clawing at her heart, as if the very marrow of her being was being pulled apart. The weight of her choices pressed heavily on her chest, each step feeling more agonizing than the last. Dorian stood rooted in place, his gaze following her, pain etched into every feature. He made no move to pursue her, he respected her wish. Yet the fractures had formed an unbridgeable chasm that seemed to separate them beyond reckoning. She could see the heartache settling in the lines of his face as the walls he had built around himself tightened in response to her departure. In the hushed solitude of that moment, Lila felt the swell of anguish ripple through her body like a tidal wave, crashing relentlessly against the shores of her heart. Her instincts screamed for retreat, to protect not just herself but Dorian as well. Yet, that very act of pushing away, of creating distance, scorched her like boiling water, leaving her hollow and aching in its wake. Stepping outside into the chill of the night air, the cool breeze brushed against her flushed cheeks, a stark contrast to the heat of the confrontation that had boiled within her just minutes before. Each breath was a bitter reminder of what she had forsaken, the emotions raging within her, weaving a tapestry of regret in her heart. How could something that felt so right vanish between her fingers like smoke? But Dorian stood rooted in the hall, feeling the emptiness swell around him as she slipped away, swallowed by the night. The heartache enveloped him like a shroud, a haunting echo of the connection they had forged, only to see it now violently unraveled. In that moment, amidst his turmoil, he vowed to protect her, even from afar, a commitment formed from pain and longing. The path ahead felt increasingly uncertain without her light guiding him, yet he would defend her against whatever darkness awaited. The night stretched on, a solemn witness to their painful separation. As time continued its relentless march, Lila and Dorian were left to wrestle with their own demons, feelings of isolation blossoming like wildflowers in a barren field, each petal a fragment of a shattered connection, reflecting the harrowing truth that suffering could lead to deeper revelations about themselves and their lives. If only they could somehow find their way back to one another. In the midst of this despair, a glimmer of hope lay not in the banishment of strife, but in the understanding that perhaps through this emotional upheaval and separation, they could discover who they truly were and what love truly meant. Chapter 5. The Confrontation. As the oppressive dark clouds of peril began to loom ominously over her once peaceful existence, casting long, unsettling shadows across her world, Lila felt an irresistible, visceral tug pulling her back towards Dorian, the man who had come to embody not just safety, but also an intense, undeniable passion in her life. The gnawing threat posed by the rival faction, a shadowy entity that had always felt distant and abstract, had now escalated, their sinister intentions no longer shrouded in the comforting veil of mystery but glaringly evident through a recent brutal attack that had put her very life in immediate, terrifying jeopardy. Each rapid beat of her heart hammered out a frantic rhythm of fear for her safety, and with each beat came the stark, undeniable realization that Dorian was not merely a fleeting figure from her past, nor a casual acquaintance, but rather the singular, indispensable person she needed desperately by her side as she navigated the treacherous, unpredictable waters of this escalating new conflict. The acrid scent of ozone from the lingering magic of the attack still clung faintly to her clothes, a chilling reminder of how close she had come to oblivion, sharpening her resolve into a desperate burning need. A metallic tang of fear, sharp and unpleasant, coated her tongue. Driven by an urgent, almost primal need to seek his aid, she embarked on a journey to the secluded place where their hearts had once so intricately intertwined, where laughter had echoed freely and whispered secrets had bound them together. The rough, uneven terrain beneath her worn boots was barely registered as her mind replayed fragments of their past. With each measured step she took along the winding path, the vivid, almost tactile memories of their shared moments, both joyful and intensely private, flooded back, enveloping her in a bittersweet wave of nostalgia and anticipation. She could almost feel the phantom warmth of his hand in hers, hear the low rumble of his laugh. As she drew nearer, a potent mix of adrenaline and a deeply familiar aching yearning coursed through her veins, tingling beneath her skin like 1,000 tiny needles. A whirlwind of questions assaulted her mind, each one laced with anxiety. Would he, Dorian, the protector, the lover, be willing to risk everything once more for her? Would he truly comprehend the profound gravity of her situation? The sheer escalating danger that now clung to her like a second skin, heavy and suffocating. A faint, familiar scent of old wood smoke and rich, earthy magic distinctly Dorian's reached her, a comforting anchor in the storm of her thoughts, a scent that promised solace and strength. Upon finally reaching his unassuming door, she hesitated for only a single fleeting instant, her hand trembling slightly as it hovered over the cool, worn wood, the grain rough beneath her fingertips. A wave of doubt, cold and sharp, threatened to overwhelm her, but the memory of the recent attack, the searing heat of a nearly fatal spell, spurred her forward. She gathered her courage, a fragile but potent spark, and pushed the door open with a soft sigh, the old hinges groaning a quiet welcome. Dorian stood there, his magnificent broad shoulders silhouetted powerfully against the soft, fading glow of the evening light that filtered through a nearby window, painting him in hues of amber and shadow. His expression as he turned towards her was a complex chiaroscuro of profound surprise and immediate palpable concern, his brow furrowing with a question he hadn't yet voiced. The instant their gazes locked, a powerful, almost visible surge of raw electricity arced between them, sparking in the very air, igniting it with a silent, thunderous explosion of unspoken emotion that resonated deep within her bones, a feeling akin to an ancient, forgotten magic awakening. Her breath hitched, catching painfully in her throat. "Lila," he murmured, his voice a low, resonant hum, thick with warmth and astonishment, yet tinged with an underlying, almost breathless urgency that mirrored her own frantic heartbeat. It was the sound she had yearned for, a melody of comfort and concern. "What, in the name of all that is sacred, brings you here? To my door? You look," he trailed off, his eyes scanning her face, seeing past the immediate turmoil to the deeper fear etched there, tracing the faint lines of exhaustion and terror around her eyes. He could practically taste the fear radiating from her. "Danger is pursuing me, Dorian," she interrupted, the stark weight of her words crashing down between them, a heavy, undeniable truth. Her voice, though steady, held a desperate edge, a tremor she fought to control. "I need your help, truly." It's not just my life that's at risk. They're coming for what we have painstakingly built, for what we could irrevocably lose, for the very fabric of our world. The air in the room seemed to thicken, suddenly charged with the gravity of her confession, a slight metallic tang of fear pricking at the back of her throat, a taste of impending conflict. He has to understand, she thought frantically. He has to see how dire this is. In that heart-stopping moment, the harsh, unforgiving realities of the world outside, with its looming threats and brutal factions, seemed to press in on them, a suffocating presence, a cold draught seeping in through the cracks in the door. Yet, within the sudden fragile sanctuary of that quiet room, they were momentarily cocooned, shielded by the sheer intensity of their raw emotion and the unbreakable magnetic pull of their unbroken gazes. The perceived barriers of age, of past misunderstandings, of every unspoken fear and hesitation seemed to coalesce into an insurmountable wall for a fleeting, terrifying moment. Can we truly overcome this? She wondered, a flicker of doubt dancing in her mind. But both, in the depths of their souls, understood with absolute clarity that now was not the time for such self-imposed obstacles. Now was a time for swift, decisive action, for clarity of purpose, for an irrevocable decision. The silence in the room hummed with their unspoken agreement, thick with unspoken longing. With a shallow, ragged breath, Dorian moved, stepping closer to her, his heart drumming a furious, rapid rhythm against his ribs as the sheer intensity of what was at stake enveloped them both, a tangible, suffocating shroud. He could feel the tremor in his own hands, the tightening in his chest. It was no longer just about the external threats, the shadowy rival faction, the encroaching danger. It was also profoundly about their feelings, the unacknowledged, searing passion that had simmered so fiercely beneath layers of fear, denial, and hesitant restraint for so long. Lila, my love, you must know, I would do anything, absolutely anything, to keep you safe from harm, he confessed, the words spilling from his lips with an urgency that perfectly matched the gravity of the moment, each syllable heavy with profound emotion, a deep resonance that vibrated in her chest. You know that, don't you? In your heart of hearts? His eyes, usually so guarded, were now wide open, vulnerable, pleading for her understanding, reflecting the unspoken truths between them. Yes, Dorian, I do, she breathed, leaning into him instinctively, drawn by an invisible, powerful force, a force as fundamental as gravity. The radiant heat emanating from his body enveloped her, a comforting warmth against the sudden chill that had permeated her very bones, ignoring the faint, acrid smell of old magic and new danger. It ignited a fierce, protective fire deep within the depths of her soul, a spark that had long lain dormant, now roaring to life. But we must prepare for this together. The rival faction will not relent easily, Dorian. They are relentless, she warned, the cold certainty of their ruthlessness, a heavy weight in her tone. In that heart-stopping, breathless instant, both their tenuous grips on the harsh, mundane reality of their world seemed to dissolve, leaving only the intoxicating, dizzying blend of raw vulnerability and an almost unbearable longing. As they finally came together, their embrace was not merely a physical act, but a profound manifestation of all they had fiercely avoided, of all they had denied themselves in the past. The feel of his strong arms encircling her, the solid press of his chest against hers, was an anchor in the storm, a promise of protection she desperately craved. Yet now, in this moment of acute peril, they anchored themselves firmly in this fierce, undeniable connection, acutely aware of both the grave dangers lurking just beyond the protective walls of his home and the inescapable, beautiful truth of their burgeoning, powerful feelings. The soft brush of his cloak against her cheek, the solid feel of his arms around her, grounded her amidst the swirling chaos, a sensory reassurance that whispered safety against the rising tide of fear. Their passionate reunion unfolded with a raw, desperate fervor, a maelstrom of emotions that threatened to consume them entirely. Kisses that communicated more profound meaning than words ever could, that articulated unspoken fears, cherished hopes, and the terrifying seriousness of their predicament, all shimmering like an ethereal mist in the air between them. Her fingers threaded into his soft hair, the silky strands cool against her skin as their mouths met. A desperate communion. This intertwining of bodies and souls, this intimate melding of two separate beings, brought forth an understanding that transcended their age difference, societal expectations, and the looming chaos that threatened to violently pull them apart. They would confront this alarming, existential threat together, Dorian and Lila, united not just by circumstance, but by an unbreakable, burgeoning love, ready to face whatever darkness, whatever brutality lay ahead. The very scent of his skin, a mixture of leather, ancient spice, and something uniquely Dorian, filled her senses, intoxicating and reassuring all at once, a fragrance of home and belonging. As they solidified their silent pact, their hands clasped together, fingers interlaced, a silent declaration of shared purpose, the insidious shadows that had begun to take residence just outside the door, in the periphery of their vision, harboured intentions far more sinister, more brutally effective than anything they could possibly imagine or foresee. The rival faction was no longer simply a distant, abstract, looming danger. They were a brutal, highly organised force, poised and ready to strike with devastating precision. Dorian felt the full, suffocating force of his duty, his protective instincts tighten around him like an unyielding noose, a heavy weight settling in his chest, a palpable pressure. It was no longer solely about shielding Lila from harm, though that remained his paramount concern. It was now also, profoundly, about preserving everything they cherished, everything they had painstakingly built, and everything they had chosen, together, to embrace. A cold determination set in his jaw, with a fresh burning determination ignited within them both, a fire that chased away the lingering chill of fear. They immediately began to strategize, pooling their vast knowledge, disparate skills, and limited resources. The scratch of quill on parchment, the rustle of old maps, filled the quiet room as they worked. Dorian's resolve hardened, becoming an unyielding pillar of strength as he meticulously outlined their potential defenses, envisioning every possible scenario, every countermeasure, the gears of his strategic mind turning with renewed vigor. Meanwhile, Lila, her mind sharp and clear despite the lingering fear, presented her invaluable insights about the faction, drawing upon her own harrowing experiences and the cryptic whispers of ancient magic she had encountered during her intensive studies. She could almost taste the subtle, distinct flavors of various magical energies as she spoke, each one offering a clue, a secret to exploit. Together, their urgent planning morphed from a mere exercise in pure survival into an intricate, beautiful tapestry of defiance, woven with threads of hope and courage. Their blossoming love, their powerful connection, became the very backbone, the unyielding foundation, upon which they would craft their formidable response. "Let's draw them out, Dorian," Lila proposed, her gaze fierce and unwavering, burning with an almost feral intensity, a spark of pure, unadulterated resolve. Her voice, though low, was resolute, carrying a chilling confidence. "We must show them, without a shadow of a doubt, that we are not afraid, that we will fight fiercely, unyieldingly, for this, for everything we hold dear." A thrill, cold and sharp, yet invigorating, ran through her, a rush of adrenaline that sharpened her senses. Dorian nodded slowly, a surge of profound admiration washing over him, warming him from the inside out, as he watched her, seeing the warrior spirit ignite within her eyes, a reflection of his own fierce protectiveness. "Whatever it takes, Lila, to protect you, to protect us, I will not hesitate. Not for a moment," he vowed, the absolute gravity of his promise a palpable force in the air between them, sealing their bond with an unspoken oath, a promise etched in the very fabric of their beings. As they meticulously prepared for the inevitable confrontation, the emotional stakes rose higher with each passing moment, tightening their grip on both their hearts. Despite the ever-present suffocating danger, something vital, something exquisitely beautiful, flourished robustly between them. A shared purpose, a synchronized determination that seemed to imbue them with an almost supernatural strength and a crystalline clarity of thought amidst the chaotic storm brewing around them. The passionate fires of their connection, now fully blazing, fueled their unyielding determination, transforming their fear not into paralysis but into a potent, sharpened weapon they would wield together against the encroaching, malevolent darkness. They worked late into the night, the only sound the rustle of papers, the soft clicks of magical preparations, and the steady, comforting rhythm of their shared breathing. Days later, when the inevitable showdown finally erupted, it was every bit as thrilling as it was terrifying. The rival faction arrived, a swirling mass enveloped in ominous shadows, their very presence a palpable storm of chaos descending upon Dorian's secluded home. The ground vibrated faintly underfoot as they approached, a low, guttural hum that sent a shiver down Lila's spine, a deep vibration that resonated in her bones. Dorian stood utterly resolute, his heart pounding a frantic drumbeat against his ribs, a percussive rhythm of readiness, but his focus sharpened with laser-like intensity on Lila, who stood bravely beside him, her small frame radiating fierce defiance, a brilliant, unwavering light shining in her eyes. They moved as one, a perfectly synchronized force, meeting the encroaching chaos together, their movements fluid and instinctual like dancers in a deadly ballet. They were ready to fight, not just for their precious lives, but for the very essence of their love, ready to forsake anything and everything that sought to violently tear them apart. As crackling spells ignited the air, casting an eerie, flickering light across the scene, and violent confrontations erupted around them, the scent of burning magic, sharp and metallic, filled the air. The shouts of battle, the clang of steel, the hiss of spells created a cacophony that tested their nerves. Yet, amidst the chaos, it became achingly clear that this epic battle was not merely about raw magic nor brute force, but about the very essence, the enduring power of their connection. Each spell that flew, a streak of raw power, each thunderous clash of energy, echoed their unwavering resolve to stand together, united, against the overwhelming fear and crushing uncertainty. With every shared heartbeat synchronizing them, linking them in an unbreakable chain, a pulse of shared life force, they faced the brutal rival faction with an unwavering, almost audacious courage, each passing moment underscoring the profound, simple belief that love, indeed, conquers all. The warmth of Dorian's presence at her side, the subtle brush of his arm against hers, was a constant, powerful reminder of what they fought for, a beacon in the swirling darkness. Chapter 6. Immortal Love. Following the tumultuous conflict that had threatened to unravel the delicate thread of their relationship, a conflict that had felt like a tempest tearing through the fragile tapestry of their unspoken affection, Dorian and Lila found themselves at a pivotal juncture. The echoes of past doubts and the bitter taste of fear still lingered on their tongues, a stark reminder of how close they had come to losing each other. Yet, even through that lingering unease, a profound shift was occurring. Their hearts, once filled with the uncertainty of societal restrictions and the suffocating weight of familial expectations, began to align with a newfound understanding of their love for one another. It was a revelation that blossomed in the quiet spaces between heartbeats, a truth whispered by their very souls. The lingering scent of aged parchment and sweet lavender, usually a comfort that wrapped around Lila like a familiar shawl, now seemed to carry a fresh, exhilarating tang of possibility, a hint of wild, untamed magic. It tickled her nostrils, awakening senses she hadn't fully acknowledged before. Underneath the cozy, almost palpable glow of the enchanted lights in the bookshop where they often met in secret, the very air seemed to hum with a magical energy that pulsed gently around them. Their hushed conversations, previously punctuated by nervous glances and the almost painful flutter in Lila's chest, had given way to something far more profound. Lila's confidence blossomed like the vibrant flowers in the garden she loved, unfurling delicate petals with each steady breath she took. She could feel the sensation of it spreading through her, a warmth emanating from her core, pushing out the chill of self-doubt. Gone were the days of insecurity and the gnawing doubt that had shadowed her every move. She had come to realize her self-worth is not tethered to age or the rigid, often cruel norms of society, but rather defined by her own heart and choices, a truth that now resonated through her very bones, a deep, unwavering conviction. The soft hum of distant magical energy, a constant presence in Ilara's shop, seemed to harmonize with the growing certainty in her soul, weaving itself into the fabric of her being. She felt an inner strength, a quiet power she hadn't dared to claim before, settling into her shoulders, straightening her spine. A sense of lightness, almost of buoyancy, lifted her spirit, making the world seem brighter, sharper, more vibrant. As they sat side by side on the worn, inviting couch, its plush velvet yielding comfortably to their forms as if embracing them, the air between them shimmered with the weight of unspoken words, a silent symphony of shared feelings. The gentle warmth emanating from Dorian's proximity was a comfort, a palpable assurance that he was truly there, truly hers. Lila broke the silence, her voice, usually a gentle murmur, now possessed a surprising clarity and strength that seemed to cut through the quiet, resonating with a newfound authority. She felt the words forming, not as a desperate plea, but as a confident declaration. "Dorian," she said, her tone steady with resolve, the sound a melodic counterpoint to the soft crackle of the nearby enchanted fireplace, its tiny dancing flames casting warm, flickering shadows on the wall. "I don't want to hide anymore. I am tired of living in the shadows, of feeling as though my love for you is something to be ashamed of." She paused, her gaze locking with his, a fierce determination burning in her eyes. "Our love deserves to be celebrated, not shrouded in darkness. If we embrace it openly, perhaps we can pave the way for others who feel the same, showing them that love transcends all boundaries." A tremor of anticipation ran through her, a mixture of fear and exhilaration at the prospect of stepping out into the light. Dorian, his intense green eyes, often guarded and shadowed by the weight of his own worries, now reflecting the spark of hope igniting within his soul like twin emeralds, nodded fervently. He too longed for the freedom to love Lila without the burden of whispers and judgment hanging over them, a burden that had felt like a suffocating cloak, heavy and restricting. He had tasted the bitterness of that judgment for far too long, and the thought of an open, honest future with Lila was like a cool, refreshing drink after a long journey through a parched desert. He reached out, his warm hand finding hers, his fingers gently interlacing with hers. The comforting pressure affirmed their connection without words, a silent promise. His touch sent a shiver, warm and electric, through Lila's arm, spreading through her whole body, a tangible manifestation of their bond. She squeezed his hand in return, her heart swelling with a mixture of tenderness and resolute courage. In that touch, she felt the entirety of their shared future, solid and real. With each passing moment, solidifying her growing faith in their shared dreams and the journey they were now unequivocally on. She felt a profound sense of rightness, a conviction that this was exactly where she was meant to be, who she was meant to be with. The future, once a nebulous concept, now felt tangible, promising, an open book waiting for their story to be written. With their hearts intertwined and shoulders squared against the world, feeling the gentle brush of evening breezes against their skin, a cool caress after the day's warmth, they embarked on this extraordinary journey together, a journey illuminated by the magic of love, a magic that shimmered and hummed around them, a palpable presence. They were ready to write their own story, filled with hope, adventure, and the profound knowledge that, indeed, age is irrelevant when love is involved. And as they turned back towards the bookshop, its warm glow beckoning them home, a beacon in the gathering dusk, laughter spilling from their lips and echoing softly in the twilight. They felt a profound sense of anticipation that the future held endless possibilities. A future that was theirs to forge, anchored in the unwavering strength of acceptance and the undeniable, enduring power of their love. The scent of old books and magic mingled with the fresh night air, a symphony of sensations promising a lifetime of shared moments. If you enjoyed Immortals by J.E. Michelle, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, and share it with a friend who would enjoy a free Gothic romance story. Your support means so much. You can also help the channel by subscribing, and if you'd like to discover more of J.E. Michelle's ebooks, you'll find the link in the comments below. Thank you for listening.